July 24th, 1701, Antoine Cadillac stood on the banks of the Detroit River and claimed his settlement. In 1802, his settlement was incorporated as a village named Detroit. By the year 1950, Detroit's population had reached over 1.8 million people, but today, less than 700,000 live within its 140 square miles. How did a city that was once the second largest city in the world end up going bankrupt?
It begins in the 1820s, when Detroit makes its motto, Supremius Meliora Resurgent Sembrius, which translates to, "We hope for better days and shall rise from the ashes." This marks in history the steady rise of Metro Detroit.
Then 30 years later, Bernhard Stroh opens up a brewery company. This signals his competitors to come to Detroit to stop his rise to success. For the city of Detroit, it did nothing to stop the rise of attention that this small Michigan city was getting.
Then the match that lit the powder keg was on June 4th, 1896, when Henry Ford tested his first automobile prototype on the streets of Detroit, which showed the world that you could produce a fully working car for a reasonable price. This common man's car, as many people call it, sparked an industrial revolution in Detroit.
3 years later, Ransom E. Olds opens Detroit's first auto manufacturing plant. This was made possible by Ford introducing the assembly lines and the automobile. Within only 3 years, the automobile has changed Detroit, and for the better. Then in 1903, Ford starts Ford Motor Company, and soon brothers John and Horace Dodge begin to manufacture their own cars, and it becomes like dominoes. New car companies begin to pop up, and soon Detroit is put on the map as a Rust Belt city.
Then, in the 1950s, over 47 years later, Detroit becomes the fourth largest city in the U.S., hitting 1.8 million people with over 260,000 manufacturing jobs, dramatically overhitting many cities during the time.
The majority of Detroit's automobile manufacturing came from Ford, GM, and Chrysler, known as the Big Three. They were the three largest automobile manufacturers in the world, all concentrated in the city of Detroit. The concentration of the Big Three shut down all other small auto manufacturers in the city. One of the last small auto manufacturers was Packard. In 1954, Packard merged with Studebaker as a last attempt to stay alive in the luxury car market, which was currently being dominated by Cadillac. In 1958, the Packard plant on East Grand Boulevard was closed, and in the following year the Packard nameplate was pulled completely off the market. The closing of the Packard plant was the first major sign of the decline of Detroit's industry. Today, the plant stands abandoned as a symbol of Detroit's decline. However, the closing of the Packard plant meant less competition for the Big Three and allowed them to completely dominate the auto industry in Detroit. Small communities made up of auto workers and small businesses formed around Detroit's auto plants. These communities thrived and were examples of how the auto industry benefited Detroit and its economy. The auto industry was doing so well that in the 1960s, most of the Big Three's executives and higher paid workers began moving out of the city and into Oakland County and cities like Bloomfield Hills. This was the beginning of Detroit's decentralization, which was one of the main reasons for Detroit's decline. The building of Metro Detroit's freeway system also contributed to the city's decentralization. They allowed for faster and more convenient travel in and out of the city, allowing workers who work in the city to live in the suburbs. This decentralization is often referred to as white flight because it was mostly only white auto workers who were able to move out into the suburbs. This is mainly due to segregation. Most black people working in Detroit were not given the high-paying executive positions and could often not afford to move out of the city. Those who could afford to move out of the city were often denied service from real estate agencies, causing a high concentration of colored people living in the city. On July 23, 1967, Detroit's racial tension hit its peak when police raided an unlicensed after-hours bar. Police confrontations with patrons in the bar and people on the street evolved into one of the biggest riots in U.S. history, known as the 12th Street Riots. The riots were a war between the inner-city black residents and the police. President Lyndon B. Johnson sent in the army to try and put an end to the dispute. 5 days of rioting left 43 dead, 467 injured, 7,200 arrested, and over 2,000 buildings in the city of Detroit destroyed. The 12th Street Riots did nothing but drive more people out of the city. In 1973, the U.S. supplied Israel with arms to help them defend themselves against a surprise military campaign from Egypt and Syria. In response, the Middle East started an oil embargo on the U.S. and many of its allies. This caused a shortage of oil in the U.S. and caused gas prices to skyrocket. The oil embargo caused the Big Three to lose much of their market shares to foreign auto manufacturers like Volkswagen and Honda, who placed more emphasis on fuel efficiency. Foreign auto companies began opening auto plants in the southern U.S. where they could operate without workers' unions. To combat their loss in sales, the Big Three began years of layoffs and wage reductions, which was met with heavy resistance from Detroit's auto unions. The Big Three started a new method of production called parallel manufacturing, where multiple smaller plants produced the same thing instead of just one larger plant. This was done in an effort to diffuse the power of the labor unions. Many of the new plants that would be housing parallel production were being built outside of the city of Detroit, in cities like Wixom, Plymouth, and Sterling Heights. As production moves out of the city, many of the old auto plants in Detroit are left abandoned, along with the neighborhoods and communities that once thrived around them. The loss of jobs that the auto industry supplied the city also caused the fall of many of Detroit's small businesses, and Detroit's economy fell significantly. In the modern day, people are starting to lose their jobs at plants located outside of the city as automation takes over many of the assembly line positions.
In 2008, when the recession hit the U.S., it hit Detroit the hardest. Detroit's economy was on a small but steady rise in the late 90s due to Mayor Dennis Archer, who was able to bring the city's credit rating up to a solid investment status. But in 2002, it was once again destroyed by Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, who used city funds for expensive cars and vacations. Kilpatrick also cost the city millions when text messages between him and Christine Beatty surfaced in 2008 that revealed a secret $8.4 million settlement by the city of Detroit. The text also suggested Kilpatrick was having an affair with Beatty. By 2008, when Kilpatrick resigned from office, the city was $300 million in debt, and both GM and Chrysler received a $17.4 billion bailout. In the following year, both companies filed for bankruptcy, and in 2013, the city filed for bankruptcy.